What's up everybody, it's Elden Sage, yeah, get at me. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the ancestral and primordial life in the lands between, specifically the Ancestral Spirits. What are the Ancestral Spirits and what is their role in the lore of Elden Ring? If you're like me, this is something you definitely wanted to know since your first time coming across one of the Ancestor Spirits in your very first playthrough. These fights aren't necessarily out of the way, but also not directly there, if that makes sense in terms of accessibility. But the Ancestral Spirits really look cool as hell. There isn't any dialogue about these beings, and on top of that, I haven't really seen any huge creator cover or explore the lore surrounding the Ancestral Spirits, so let's get into it. While fighting the Ancestral Spirits, I'm pretty sure you all saw a difference between them, with the main difference being the term Regal added to the Ancestor Spirit's name. So the best place to start when exploring the lore of these beings is the remembrance of the Regal Ancestor, which reads as follows. Ancestral spirits exist as a phenomenon beyond the purview of the Erdtree. Life sprouts from death as it does from birth, such is the way of living. If this comes off confusing a little bit, how I took it is that the Ancestral Spirits are ruled by a completely different logic from the governing influence of the Erdtree, to the point that the Erdtree can't really reach their understanding in a spiritual sense relative to the metaphysical sense. I'll explain this later in the video. I want to talk about what this faction is like first. The Fextra life description for the Shofar River reads that the banks of Shofar River bring life to the underground, where those who still follow the ancestral ways may offer worship to their ancestral gods. This tells us so many things about these beings. One, the Ancestral Spirits are considered full-blown gods, so every time we kill them we should see God slain instead of great enemy felled, or whatever it's called. This goes for the Deathbird Pantheon as well. What we can also get from this is that the ancestral worshipping faith is an ancient underlying order of a sort that really has been forgotten throughout history in the lands between, similar to the dragons. Maybe an order of nature, or perhaps an order of beasts, an order before the time of the Erdtree, since the Ainzel and Shofar rivers are said to be the grace of civilizations that flourished before the Erdtree. The power they're associated with also seems ancient. At one point before beasts gained intelligence, they were wild animals, simply live in the wildlife. In a way, they still do, and we can see that pretty clear when exploring the lands between. They're just not the dominant force throughout the lands between, or were they at one point? We don't know much about the age before the dragons, which is already considered prehistoric based on the Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman. The clarifying horn charm reads as follows. The ancestral followers believe that the horns of a long-lived beast continue to bud like antlers over and over again until the beast one day becomes an ancestral spirit. Perhaps this order was one of the beasts. Most of the orders in Elden Ring start with an outer god, which is, to my understanding, a type of celestial entity, then that outer god having some type of main envoy or a vassal, then that envoy goes on to actively create that specific order. I looked for weeks and I couldn't find any type of hint or connection to an outer god relative to the other orders we see. So I genuinely think they don't meddle with any of the outer gods, but they do seem to have a connection to a pristine plant life that bud antler-like horns. If you're having a hard time picturing what type of power this plant possesses, this plant is around the same foot of power as the Erdtree or the Haligtree, if not stronger. And the Regal Ancestor is on the same standing as Queen Marika or Radigan or any of the Deathbirds. How these buds came to be is never stated, so I won't dwell on it too long, but these plants are used to sprout life, giving ancestral spirits the ability to be reborn, causing a type of phenomenon. It is something, once again, the Erdtree itself can't perceive. The way these buds work, I think they're possibly interconnected to a spiritual plane of existence. The fact is that we know these plants exist and it originated from some type of spiritual presence, who I personally think is the god of the ancestral spirits, who of course is never stated in game. So with everything I just laid out, I think it's safe to just call this god the god of the ancestral spirits. I think this is kind of easy to follow in my opinion, not too hard. The Great Horned Headband reads, worn by ancestral follower warriors. The ancestral followers keep their distance from the Erdtree, awaiting new buds. They are certain to sprout from their very flesh and indeed their souls. To me, this line sounds like some type of offering ritualistic thing going on. There is a group of ancestral followers near a minor Erdtree in northeastern Lorania doing the same worshipping dance they do in the Shofar River, with an Erdtree avatar in front of them. It's not attacking them, so with this it seems there were some followers who left the ancestral ways and accepted the Erdtree for what it stood for. Are they still technically waiting for new buds at this minor Erdtree or something else? I'm not entirely sure, if I'm gonna be honest. I'm pretty sure you all ran into one of these followers wielding the winged great horn. Its description also gives us some more insight on what this order was like. It reads, a distinctive horn suffused with the power of ancestral spirits. This large, wing-shaped specimen is wielded as a weapon of spirit worship. In the ancestral spirit worshipping faith, these are considered envoys as wings, made to reap the lives of beings which experience no sprouting. We know off this description it means the followers that wield this weapon believe the ancestral spirits are the envoys to a higher being in this order. A weapon created by the ancestral followers made to gather the souls who experience no sprouting. This is basically their version of carrying out death, which is why some probably left this order. Humans, other races, and even their own kind probably couldn't agree or come to terms with this way of enacting out death. Speculation, of course. Before the existence of the Erd Tree, though, something else had to necessarily govern the spirits and souls throughout the lands between. Something else had to uphold the forces of nature, and that's exactly what we see with the ancestral spirits. Specifically, the regal ancestor until the Golden Order, Erd Tree, and a new altered Elden Ring said GG's. In Shintoism, Sorei refers to the term ancestral spirits or the spirits of ancestors, either or. The rituals and ideas around Sorei could be fitted around the spirits of the dead becoming some sort of enlightened being. This being can be some type of guardian or kami. I'm pretty sure most of you have heard or know what kami are. If not, they are the phenomena, deities, and spirits of the Shinto religion. They are of nature, landscapes, and dead people. Many kami are considered to be ancient ancestors of entire clans. Sorei has a certain notion to it, and it's the belief that the ceremonial services result in the ancestral spirit losing its individuality, eventually becoming a de-individualized part of the collective of Sorei. This means that the ancestral spirit's awareness or perception isn't its own in its entirety, but rather a collective essence of spirits are in control. We don't know if this is the case with the ancestor spirits in Elden Ring, it's never explained, but there is a strong chance this could be true, looking at how buds work and how they can sprout from the flesh and souls of the people and beasts who believe in the ancestral ways. Shintoism is an ever-changing concept, and it also holds that many things in the world possess a sort of spirit or a divine sense about them. Not only do I think the ancestral spirits embody this notion, but they also have a great respect for nature. Their followers do too as well. I think this is why they are worshipped, because of the role the ancestral spirits play in the nature of things in the lands between. If we look at the shining horned headband we can find in the ancestral woods, it reads, worn by ancestral followers shamans. Horns with buds that also shine are ideal ceremonial items for ancestral worship. The shamans all over the ancestral woods are singing, and there is one that's functioning in ceremonial activity in front of a carcass of an ancestral spirit. The animals and followers seem to really appreciate these ceremonies in honors of their ancestors, very similar to how ceremonies and memorials are thrown in the Shinto faith in honor of kami. So the head nods at Shintoism surrounding these beings and their followers is pretty blatant and clear. Looking at the regal ancestors arena and the multiple spirit animals inside of it, I don't think it's a stretch to say that the ancestral spirits are a spiritual force of nature in the lands between. There are crabs, wolves, red wolves, squirrel bunny looking things, turtles, rats, deer, and plant life everywhere in the Shofu River. It's a whole functional ecosystem there and throughout the lands between. As much as Papa Miyazaki is inspired by Western media, it's always nice to see him intertwine Buddhist and Shinto philosophy into the lore of his games, specifically how him and FromSoftware handle the concept of death, since things just don't die and tend to live forever in Souls games. On top of that, it's with George R.R. Martin's style of world building, which I really dig. So not only is all of this brilliant from a storytelling perspective, it's really genius from an artistic design. I will say there's also an interesting connection with the ancestral spirits in the stag that stands atop Valhalla in Norse myths, Icthirnir. Shouts out to Max Derritt because he was the first one to mention this. I really hope I pronounced your name right, bro. If not, I just committed one of the greatest crimes ever. Icthirnir's horns drip so much water that the liquid flows into a spring in whence all waters rise called Valgamir, which is located in Niflheim, the realm of the dead that is mostly covered in primordial ice. With spring comes all types of ideas of rebirth, resurrection, and regrowth. The waters in the arena in which we fight them, the spirits around the regal ancestor in his arena, and the spirits that roam the mountaintop of the giants covered in complete snow and ice might be a head nod to all of this. Please take that with a grain of salt. The horns of the ancestral spirits grow pristine plants rather than spilling excessive amounts of primordial water. But that's all I can really see in Norse mythology surrounding the ancestral spirits. In our fights against both the regal ancestor and the ancestor spirit, they both seem to have mastery with the use of spirit vapor that looks like a river flowing down while they spew it at us. The next item I'll be looking at is the ancestral spirit infant's head. Its description sheds a little more information about what this spirit vapor is. Skull of a very young ancestral spirit. Just think of how many sproutings it might bear. The vapor becomes a temporary geyser which deals continuous damage to everything it touches until it disappears. Geysers are actually found mostly near rivers and lakes. The terms continuous and disappear makes me think that the spirit vapor might be indicative of the spiritual connection of life and death, something that lies in every being. If we use the ancestral infant head and summon the spectral steed Torrent right after, we can see the similarities in the vapor actually. It looks pretty spot on in my opinion. Torrent also has the same puddle jump ability as them, and he has beast horns as well. So maybe ancestral spirits take different forms, or maybe the ancestral spirits simply teach other spiritual beings with the potential to ascend to ancestor spirits their abilities respectively. Either or, without a doubt, the connection is there in some type of capacity. Now that this information is laid out, what we can get from this is that spirit vapor, or at least the spirit particles of the vapor, is the bridge that allows spirits and spiritual beings, in the sense of Torrent being a spiritual being, to access the living plane of existence, or at least the third dimensional state of being. This is backed up with more evidence, since Torrent can physically eat, can die, and then come back to life, embodying the ancestral spirit's way of living. This might go for Melina as well. She too has her moments where she just fades in and out of existence with the same identical spirit vapor as Torrent, but Melina's lore has a bit more nuance to it. That in this video really isn't about her, so please take the mention of Melina lightly, as for almost every other spirit in game doesn't really associate with Grace like she does, and her relationship with the Erdtree isn't as distant like the other spirits as well. Up until this point, there's been a lot of speculation and really just my insight of these beings, because the lore of this game and its predecessors isn't handed to you on a silver platter, and a lot of it is really open to interpretation. So with that being said, with the lore I just presented to you, theories about these beings can be sent off in multiple directions. I'll be theorizing off of everything I covered in this video, so quick theory warning. Spirits in Elden Ring are all over the lands between, and in order to use them, you need the spirit calling bell to summon them in Spirit Caller's ashes, which are the ashen remains mostly from fallen warriors and creatures. Ronnie explains this in the beginning of the game.
'Tis a bell for calling forth spirits. Summon them with it. From ash and return to the Erdtree. The spirits will obey thine command but briefly, as they recall battles past. Now it is thine.
There is even a certain whistle that phases our spectral steed in and out of existence. When summoning a spirit while fighting, you also have the option of sending them back to a place called the Beyond. This place is never explained and is one of the biggest mysteries in Elden Ring. This might be something we all just have to accept, because Elden Ring is a high mystical fantasy with cosmic horrors. There are going to be a plethora of things that just aren't going to be explained. Since the option to send your spirit back to the Beyond is already here given to us, as soon as we get the spirit calling bell and any spirit ash we acquire, the Beyond for as long as we know has just simply been there. It just happened, I guess, some time ago. It's never stated how it came to be, we just know we can send spirits there. If you haven't noticed yet, the horned folk in the worshipping woods compared to the ancestral woods are full-blown spirits, and they don't appear until we're borderline close to them. They're the exact same color as the spirit vapor as well. This is probably what fully functioning spirits look like, instead of the ashes of remaining souls that are like a pale blue ashen color. You see, there's an assumption among the community that I keep seeing regarding the hierarchy of this order, where people think that the higher god of the ancestral spirits is an ancestral version of the Erdtree, since they have some type of connection and are linked more to nature rather than a higher being. I've seen this on Reddit and in the comment sections of the Regal Ancestors OST. Editing Sage here. Earlier in the video, I mentioned the winged greathorn and its description and how they're considered envoys' wings. So who exactly is higher than the ancestral spirits in this hierarchy of theirs? I called this higher being the god of ancestral spirits. If this name actually sounds fond to you, by all means continue to call it that. But while editing, I personally just started feeling like this name just correlates too heavily with the outer gods, and this order doesn't really have a connection with any of the outer gods like the other orders, so I want to call this higher being the Great Spirit. Just wanted to clear up any type of confusion that may have happened from that phrase. But the only other trees mentioned besides the Erd tree is the Great Tree and Hallig Tree. The many crucible incantations go in length of the Great Tree and how it basically was all in on primordial blended life and primal energy, and I don't think the Hallig Tree is considered ancient. Trees obviously carry some type of importance in this universe, but the Erd Tree isn't considered a god, nor was the Great or Hallig Tree in the sense that the Greater Will is, but rather seen as luminous creations of a current or aspiring age. Everything we see regarding the crucible incantations have horns, tails, fire breath abilities representing this primordial life, and the Hallig Tree, to sum it up, is basically a purified version of the Erd Tree, so I don't think this is actually the case. We know that the pantheon of ancestral spirits are considered gods in the sense that America is a god. With everything I presented about the lore of these beings, I don't think the ancestral spirits were associated with the fingers, the Erd Tree, nor the Elden Ring, a metaphysical item that could bestow and remove laws or necessarily runes of reality, but rather associated with the beyond and ruled as envoys to a higher spirit from the beyond in its own age of nature, or whatever you want to call it, before the dragon's reign and before beasts gained intelligence, and that the plants or buds that even allow this phenomenon to happen in the first place was designed from this higher spirit in the beyond as a spiritual anchor. When we send our ashen remains back to the beyond, the spirit bell not only does the similar puddle jump effect as the ancestral spirits, but the ashen remains also fade out of existence, similar to the spirit vapor process. They may not be on the same level or plane of existence as the ancestor spirits, but we know one thing for certain with no written lore about this place. The ashen remains we collect in our journey dwell in the beyond when we're venturing off alone. The beyond might be the extra metaphysical presence, dimension, or to be exact, the spiritual cosmos beyond our mortal state of third dimensional being. It'll basically be invisible to us. Just like the greater will in a way, the great spirit or a higher spirit from the beyond was the spiritual prowess that once basked over the lands between, a dimension also governed by forces, laws, and principles, which is why I think this faction isn't connected to an outer god relative to the other orders we've seen in Elden Ring. The Erd Tree, something formed from primordial matter itself, couldn't even understand the ancestral spirits. Even after we defeat the ancestral spirits, specifically the regal ancestor and its soul hewn into the Erd Tree, its essence still remains underground. I don't think it's a stretch to say that the beyond and the life within it might be what these beings are associated with, or where maybe this unnamed great spirit resides. Let's take a look at a certain line in the remembrance of the regal ancestor. They exist as a phenomenon beyond the purview of the Erd Tree. It doesn't read this exactly as sending the summon back to the beyond or where this place is to be exact, but it's so straight up in our faces that it's just hard to leave it alone. You can say that this game isn't just a battle to the throne, but also a battle of cosmic and extraterrestrial forces. This can of course be wrong, as we really don't know who dwells in the beyond besides our spirit ashen remains. We might never know, but this is just my theory. The lore for this game in particular lacks any real timeline of events before the shattering, so interpreting the lore at times can be really jarring. So everything summarized up until this point in a concise and understandable way is the Great Spirit created spirits how he or she saw fit, then designed a pristine plant life to carry out its version of spirits in the lands between. The buds eventually became the progenitor to the regal ancestor spirit and the ancestral spirits, who are also the spiritual divine forces of nature in the lands between. The ancestral spirits are manifestations of these plants, and by channeling and sprouting new growth buds, they can reach a state beyond the purview of the Erd Tree and be reborn. But as we know it, a new altered Elden Ring, a new order, and the Erd Tree, which had its own modified version of governing spirits and souls, ultimately became the most dominant order in the lands between, and the ancestral spirits weren't really needed anymore. With the golden order in place, the ancestral spirits and their followers stay away from the Erd Tree and its influence and continue their ways of these spiritual arts. Being underground, associated with the phenomenon and two entirely different beliefs relative to that of the golden orders and greater wills, this order has not only welcomed a new place to offer worship to those who still believe in the ancestral ways, but have become a symbol of fertility in the Shofar River. The story of this order doesn't seem necessarily evil, nor borderline sunshine and rainbows, something along the lines that describes the essence of nature perfectly: fearsome, beautiful, and something that's not meant to be fully comprehended. The whole point of introducing creatures that aren't of our mortal logic and perceptions is that you aren't meant to fully understand them. They are a complex existence. Not a single NPC in this game even understands them. Almost all of them don't even know they exist, including the infamous All-Knowing. I'll have to admit, I did feel kind of bad after killing them though. So yeah, that pretty much sums up to what I believe the lore of the Ancestral Spirits. Did I miss something? Did I misinterpret things? I know there's going to be people who disagree, and that's fine. As always, the lore from most of the Souls games is open to interpretation, and this is just mine, and it is always subject to change. The Ancestral Spirits, followers, and the Shofar River are undoubtedly some of the best pieces of content in Elden Ring and some of the best in the franchise. So thank you for watching the video. Do you guys think we'll get Ancestral Spirit content in future DLC? I welcome plenty of discussions, so please let me know what you guys think. This video took longer than expected to make. I don't really mind making longer videos or care how long they are to be exact, but nonetheless, I'm still happy with how it came out. Covering the lore for the Ancestral Spirits was really exciting, so I hope you all enjoy it. My goal for the end of the year is to reach 15,000 subs, and after the success of my last video, I say we're heading in the right direction. Really quick, I want to take a moment to shout out and thank Bloodexer on Twitter. I hit him up a few days ago, maybe a week or two by the time I upload this, to use his artwork for the thumbnail for this video. He politely agreed, and his artwork is really just insane. Stuff like this really makes my day. He does way more stuff than Elden Ring, and he also does commissions, so please check out his stuff and get some art if you're interested. I'll be leaving a link to his website and Twitter in the description below. So once again, thank you all for watching the video. Signing off, and peace.